We had 18 months to develop a car.
Hello everyone, welcome to my platform. Glad you are here. I am honored this week to be welcoming Mr. Joe Rothenberg. Mr. Rothenberg was a guiding force behind the first in-space servicing mission of the Hubble Space Telescope for NASA, and which in itself is a massive accomplishment. Mr. Rothenberg has an incredible career spanning over 6 decades and has served in almost every single technical and leadership role within NASA. He started his career in 1964, and 19 years later, in 1983, he entered Goddard as an operations manager for the Hubble Space Telescope. In 1987, he was appointed as chief of Goddard's Mission Operations Division, and in 1989, 2 years later after that, he was appointed as Deputy Director of Mission Operations and Data Systems. In 1990, he was appointed as the Associate Director for Flight Projects for Hubble. In 1995, he was appointed as Goddard's overall director, and 3 years later, he was appointed by NASA as the Associate Administrator for Spaceflight. For almost a decade, from 2003 until 2011, Mr. Rothenberg represented the Swedish Space Corporation as a president and senior vice president of international development. He was Google's engineering director for Terra Bella, which was formerly known as Skybox and was acquired by Google for $500 million in 2014. Mr. Rothenberg was also the chairman of the technical advisory board governing Skybox images. Since 2016, he has chaired and taken part in multiple technical and executive advisory boards, including Conrad Foundation and 7Benefit Limited. Currently, Mr. Rothenberg is member of the board of directors at Conrad Space Development Corporation. Now, this interview is not short by any means. It is 5 hours long. I was extremely eager to understand every single detail of the career path of Mr. Rothenberg, every single challenge encountered, every single obstacle that had to be overcome. He was extremely humble and kind to be able to allocate 3 different recording sessions to my initiative, and I want to thank him for that. To make this easier for you to digest and for me to produce and edit, I will produce this as 3 different chapters, i.e. 3 different videos, each one covering a specific aspect of Mr. Rothenberg's life. Usually, at least I believe so, I try to withhold my enthusiasm for those interviews and make them look extremely professional. That is the premise of my channel. This is what I do. I couldn't help but smile throughout the entire process in the face of the sheer amount of knowledge I gained from my discussion with Mr. Rothenberg. You have to also understand that the totality basically of my guests, they are volunteers. They volunteer their valuable time to enlighten me and you guys without necessarily getting something back. These are good-hearted, first of all, but accomplished professionals and leaders who freely allocate their time to educate the young generation. I want to thank all of them for that. Now, it is a very rare occasion that I can completely unfold my thought process and ask every single question I want to ask to every individual. Usually I have about 30 to 40 minutes. It is very difficult to compress somebody's career in 30 to 40 minutes and extract lessons from it. It can be enough, but it is not always enough. This interview with Mr. Rothenberg stands as one of those rare occasions. Together with us, you will understand every single decision an awarded top leader at NASA made throughout his career. You will be immersed into the world of difficult decisions, losses, major project breakthroughs, people management skills, what went right, what went wrong, what would he do differently if he was to go back and do it all over again. This interview, in my opinion, can be considered a fairly complete roadmap, a point of reference if you want, without exaggerating, for every single individual who wants to become a leader. You don't necessarily have to belong or aspiring to enter the aerospace industry. Doesn't matter which industry you want to go. I don't believe this interview should be viewed only once. I believe you should be revisiting this interview, watching it again and again and again, At least when I was editing it, every single time I was viewing it with a different point of view, extracting a different lesson each time. I don't want to drag this any longer. I want to let Mr. Rothenberg speak his truth, and you can make a decision as far as the value of the interview. But I hope you find it in the same way I did. How is the decision going to be made for a program when it goes against the political line that the government has drawn in NASA? Have you ever encountered a program like this?
If the congressional language said they must buy a launch vehicle from SpaceX, it wouldn't be that prescriptive, but it will be prescriptive. It could be, okay, for a certain kind of mission where if you don't buy it from SpaceX or somebody else who has it one commercially, you're going to have to develop it, and they don't want, that obviously becomes prohibitive. How was the culture after 1986, so in the late 80s, after the accident happened with the Challenger in NASA?
Obviously, there was more formality to the decision process and more rules in place after the Challenger. For example, the fact that management overruled an engineer, that was the principal. That's what caused the problem. But the problem, was the design. But nevertheless, if they lived by the temperatures you pointed out, good chance they wouldn't have had that problem. But when I was asked to take over lead the repair mission, was in the end of July of 1990. At that point, it was a national disgrace, a national joke. The comedians, everybody. So that had a rippling effect. Okay, Congress, of course, wasn't going to stand up and support something that was an embarrassment to the government. And
spades will be remembered as stepping up to the challenge and knocking it down and turning it around into a victory.